Imagine you have to monitor log files. You need to go in there manually and figure out what's going on if anything goes wrong. How about this happens instead? How about we set up a program where we can create log files and we can automatically send notifications to our own email when something goes wrong. So there's a critical message there. We could then refresh our inbox and we get these messages delivered directly to us. That's right, we can have an automated log error message notification system, all using Python. The goal of this project is going to be monitoring a log file for specific keywords such as error or critical, and you can actually put this as whatever you want, but I'm going to focus on those to begin with. And then we're going to send email alerts when they're detected. And here's a plan. We're going to create a script to monitor a log file using the Watchdog library. We're going to use SMTP lib to send email notifications, and to simulate a real-world scenario, I'm going to generate some fake log entries to test our monitoring system. So, okay, before we start coding, we need to make sure that our environment is ready. So we need to install the required libraries, and in this case, it's going to be Watchdog. So all you need to do is head on over to your terminal and we can get this started. So here I am, I'm at the terminal, and all you need to do is run a simple pip install command, and it's going to be for Watchdog. I already have this installed. It's going to say that the requirement is satisfied, but I'll run it anyway. And once you've installed this, you will then be set up ready with all the libraries that you need. Now, another thing I should point out, you're obviously going to need a Gmail account for sending emails. If you need to know how to do this, don't worry, I've actually created a separate video, a tutorial on how to set up Gmail to work with any Python program. So hopefully there'll be a link somewhere for that. I would recommend following that video, setting up exactly what I've done in there, and then you'll be ready in this project to be able to send emails from that Gmail account and to that Gmail account. So that is a separate little subset, but I have covered that in detail, so I'd recommend checking that out if you're not already familiar with how to set up Gmail to work with Python projects, and then you can continue with me in this. So now we've got our library installed, the next thing we need to do is actually start coding our monitoring system. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to head on over to our coding editor. I'm using Visual Studio Code for this. And as always, we're going to begin with our imports. So what do we need for our import? We've got a range of imports, and let's get started with those right now. So we're going to import time. We're going to import some things from the Watchdog library. So from watchdog.observers, we are going to import observer. We are also going to say from the Watchdog library.events, let's import file system event handler. Excellent. We obviously are going to be using SMTP lib for sending emails. And as I say, I have created a separate video on how to essentially set up any Python project to work with Gmail and SMTP lib. So please check that out. Otherwise, what I'm doing here might not make the most sense. And then we need to do some imports with regards to creating emails. So we're going to do email.mime, and we're going to use .text, and we're going to import mime.text. And then we're going to do the multipart as well. So from email.mime.import mime multipart. Great. So that is that. But what we also need to do is we need to import OS, and we also need to import .env. Now, on that, I will say the following. The separate instructional that I have created on how to essentially set up your Gmail to work with any Python project covers this setup. There is a separate library you need to install, which is python.env, and that is within the separate instruction that I've created. So again, head on over there, and that will give you everything you need to know to how to get this library installed, and you'll be all ready to go. We're just essentially creating an app password, setting an environment file, storing our credentials, and then using those within our script, which will become completely obvious when we start coding in a moment. But in essence, I wanted to make sure that you have absolutely no doubt that I have covered anything to do with that. So if you do need help with that part, don't worry, there's a separate video that does that. Okay, so the first thing we then need to do is, we've got ourselves set up with our imports. We have to set up our email configuration, which includes the SMTP server port, Gmail credentials, etc. And the way that we're going to do that is the following. So I'm going to use load.env, call that. Excellent. That is setting ourselves up with our environment variables. And then let's configure our SMTP server. So we're going to create the following variable, SMTP server. And of course, we're going to set this to .gmail.com because we're going to be using Gmail for the sending of email messages when we have log issues. And then we're going to set the port to, if I could spell that properly, SMTP port, it's going to be 587 for Gmail. And then once we've got that set up, we need some variables, and the variables are going to be the following. We've got email address, email password, and recipient email. So email address, and then we've got email password, and then recipient email. Set of quotes there, so let's get rid of that. Great. All right, so for each of these, You need to set this to your own credentials, but again, the way to do this is to follow that separate instruction I've done, because I'm going to be using an environment file to load in my email address and my password, so they're secured safely away. But also with regards to recipient email, I'm going to use the same email address that I actually use for sending from. So I'm essentially going to send messages to myself. I'm going to be using my Gmail account and then sending those log error notifications to myself. That's just simple for this instructional. You can of course choose whatever recipient email that you like. So again, with regards to setting up everything on the back end, that's covered. But when it comes to delivering log error notifications, you need to choose an email address that makes sense for you. I'm going to be choosing the same email address, which is a bit circular, but for this instructional, it makes perfect sense. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So what do we need here? We need to use the OS library. We need to use getenv, and then we need to pass in our environment variable, which is email address. And then I'm going to do the same for password. It's going to be an environment variable of email password. And then when it comes to recipient email, just for the sake of writing it as a string for right now, it's actually going to be the following. So I'm going to be sending my messages to that account, which is the same actually as here. I'm just writing it out manually for the purposes of this. Okay, so we have set up our email configuration. Great. That's got our SMTP server, the port, Gmail credentials, everything set. Now we need to define a function to send emails, right? So of course, the function to send emails is going to be fairly straightforward. And doing this is actually really basic. And if you do follow along with my instructional, you have two options here. You can either write it out and put it as a part of this project, or you could save the instructional as a separate Py file and then port the function from there. So you can do whatever makes sense for you. For the purposes of this, purely because I've covered how to do this in the other instructional, I'm simply going to copy in and drop the code straight in, because we've already defined how this works within our separate instructional on how to set up Gmail to send messages. Now, again, like I say, if you want, you could set up a separate file, then just import this and just use this. That's fine, whatever you want to do. But essentially, the only difference is in this case, we're just using a subject and a body, because we're hard coding the recipient email here rather than passing in the recipient email to the function. That will make a lot more sense if you watch the other video. So I keep referring to the other video purely because we covered a lot of ground in there and how to set up Gmail to work with Python. So there's a lot of overlap. Okay then, so we have got a function that we're going to be using to send emails. Just to quickly summarize this, we've got two parameters, subject and body. Of course, when we call this function, we pass in the subject and the body. We're using a try except, so we gracefully handle any errors in case the messages don't deliver properly. We are creating a message object using my multipart. We're obviously setting the from and to the email address and the recipient email. Subject is this argument here. We are attaching the body and we're making it MIME text with plain. And then we're just using our configuration for our server here, and we are setting up a server object. We're starting it, we're logging in, we're sending the message, and then we're quitting. Of course, alternatively, you could use a context handler, and I'd recommend you to do that as well, where you simply use, let's have a look at what that would look like right now. Actually, I could redefine that right here. So I could say with SMTP lib as server, and then I could simply indent all of that, get rid of that. And then we are using the context handler. And that's probably more Pythonic because that immediately quits once we finish using server. So you could use whichever way around you want. I'm showing you both, but that is probably the more Pythonic way to do it. Okay, so we're obviously starting TLS. We're logging in with our credentials. This is a bit like logging into a Gmail account. We're doing it programmatically. And then we are sending a message. We are printing a success to the command. And if anything fails, we're letting ourselves know. Okay, all good. So now what do we need to do? We need to handle something going wrong with logs. Okay, we're monitoring logs and we need to do something when logs occur. So we're going to create an event handler class. We're going to use a little bit of OOP, and we're going to be using the file system event handler. And if you remember during our imports at the top here, we imported the file handler class. We're going to inherit from this to create our own log file handler class. This is standard. So the reason that we are inheriting from this is because it's a built-in class in the Watchdog library. And then we're going to override the onModified method within that class, and we're going to specify what actions to take when a monitored file is modified. So we're going to be monitoring a specific log file, and whenever it's modified, we're going to be saying, hey, if something happens, do something. And we're obviously going to be looking out for specific things. And in our case, that's going to be keywords that are detected. Okay, so we're going to check the last few lines of the log file for specific keywords, and then send an email alert if any are found. That's the general principle. We're going to be looking at a log file, checking the last few lines. If it's been modified, let's look for keywords that indicate errors. If they are, let's trigger an action, and that action is sending an email to our recipient to let them know, hey, there's an error that's occurred in the log file. Maybe we need to take some action. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. But it's going to make more sense when I actually start coding it. So let's jump out of this function and let's start coding this class. So I'm going to call it log file handler. Okay, and obviously, like I said, I'm going to be inheriting from the file system event handler, right? And of course, we need our init method. It's obviously our standard dunder for any class in Python. And we're going to obviously have to pass in self, we're going to pass in keywords and file path. So keywords are going to be the words that we're looking for to trigger any errors, and the file path is going to be the place where we're looking at log file. So we're passing those in, and of course we need to assign those to the instance of the class. So self.keywords is equal to keywords, and then we're going to say that self.file path is equal to file path. So we're just setting those attributes. Those are the only attributes we need for our class, and that's the initialization method taken care of. Okay, so we have a bunch of different methods that we could override when it comes to using the file system event handler. You've got unmodified, uncreated, undeleted, but we're going to work on just unmodified for this, and we're going to define custom behavior for file changes. So let's have a look. We need to create a method called unmodified, as I mentioned, so we're overriding this unmodified, and then within this we obviously have to pass in self, and we're going to pass in an event object. Okay, now we want to look to check that the source path is equal to the file path. We're going to say if the event dot source path, let's type that in properly, source path is equal to self dot file. So we want to make sure we're looking at the right file, the right log file. If it is equal to that, obviously we're going to trigger true. Let's go into this block, and we're then going to open the file. We can use a context handler to keep it neat. And then we're going to do things. We're going to read the file. We're going to look at the last 10 lines. We're going to look in our keywords. And if the keyword is in any of those lines, we're then going to create an email and send that email to let us know something's gone wrong. That's the general principle. So we're going to say context handler with open, and we're going to say self.file path. We're opening that file. We're obviously doing it in read mode. So we're using R there. And then we're saying as file. This is standard Python behavior for opening file with a context handler. We're then going to get some lines, and that's going to be file.readLines. Okay, we're assigning those to the lines variable within this context handler. Then we're saying for line in lines, but we're obviously looking from the last 10. So we're doing some slicing here. And let's get rid of that U, which we don't need. Zoom back in so you can see what's going on. Let's get rid of that. Okay, zoom in a bit more so it's nice and easy to see. So for line in lines, we're looking at the last 10 lines, which is what we're doing here with our Python slicing, if you're unfamiliar with that. Hopefully you can look it up somewhere else, but the general principle is that we can slice when we're using negative indexing to go from the last 10 lines. Okay, and then we're saying for keyword in self.keywords, let's type that properly, self.keywords. So we're looking in our list of keywords that we are assigning to the object when we create it. We're looking for each of those keywords, and we're going to say, is it in the line? If keyword in line. So think about it like this. Imagine I've got keywords, and the lists of the keywords are error and critical, for argument's sake. And I'm then looking at the last 10 lines of the log file. And in each line, I'm saying, is the word error or critical in that line? If it is, do something. If it isn't, it's fine. It's a benign log. We don't need to worry about it. It's probably just a debug message or just something that doesn't matter. But if it is error or critical, if those are our keywords, then let's do something because something has gone wrong. And what do we want to do? We want to create a subject because we are going to be sending an email. So we're going to create an F string, and we're going to say alert, and we're then going to pass in the keyword as our variable and say detected. So alert, we've detected this keyword. So something has gone wrong. That's our subject. And then in terms of the body, again, we'll create an F string and we'll just say keyword, and then we're going to pass in the keyword, spell it properly, keyword. And then you have to bear with my typing. I've got a brand new keyboard, so I'm just getting used to it. Detected in log, and then we're going to say, let's do what we're going to do. We're going to say in log, and we want it in the line. So we'll say in log, and then we'll say line. Okay, that looks fine to me. Okay, so we're looking at the line. Everything's great. We could put some blank lines in there, I guess, if we wanted to. I guess we could format that a bit nicer. Let's put 2 blank lines so we've got a nice bit of a gap. And then what do we want to do? We want to use our send email function that we've defined. So we're going to send email, and we're going to pass in our 2 parameters here, which is subject and body. Great. And that's it. We've now overridden the onModified method, and I hope that you can see it's fairly intuitive what we're doing. We're making sure that we're looking at the right file path here. So we're saying, hey, look at this file path. If it's the same file path that we've assigned to monitor, let's do something. We can open it, read the file, read the lines from the file, look at the last 10 lines, and then look at each line and check if there are any words in there that match our monitoring keywords. And if they are there, we're going to set up an email and then send it. Great. All right, so now that we've done that, the last stage is to set up the main function to start the observer and then to monitor the log file. So let's get out of our class. And now we're going to set up our nice little if name equals main block. Okay. And we've got to do something. So obviously we need to set a path to watch, which is where our log file is going to be located. So you could create your own log file. That's what I've done in this example, but you can have to monitor a specific log file. So this is the real world. You would choose a log file in the right directory where you want to monitor. Then we've got to set our keywords. Then we obviously need to do something with that. We've got to create a log file handler instance and pass in our path to watch and our keywords. So the path to watch for me is going to be, I think, where should we set that? Good question. Let's have a look at where I've got my log file located. So the path to watch is going to be, I think, in a directory called logs, and it's then going to be my log.log. So fairly straightforward. Obviously, you replace this with your own, but that's where I'm going to be monitoring. And then the keywords to watch. Let's create a nice little list of keywords we think we should watch out for. So we're going to say, obviously, depending on how you set things up, you might want to use some string formatting to put auto lowercase if you want to make sure that you catch all versions of error. I'm just going to keep it all in caps for this. Critical, let's put it back in caps. So we've got error, critical, and then imagine this could be a web server. And if it's a web server, we might have something like this, 500 internal server error. So imagine you're monitoring a web server. This might be something you want to look out for because something's gone wrong on the server. Great, so those are our two attributes that we're then going to pass in to our event handler, and our event handler is going to be an instance of our log file handler class. So we're going to create a new log file handler, and we're going to pass in, what are we going to pass in? We're going to pass in the keywords to watch, of course, because that is in init. Let's have a look, just double check in our init. So it's keywords and file path. So keywords and then path to watch, and that's going to create a new instance of an event handler object. Okay, now we need to use the observer. So if you remember that we did an observer import here, we're now going to create an observer object. So we're going to call it observer is equal to observer. That's a new instance of the observer. And then we're going to essentially use the schedule method, pass in our event handler object because we've overridden the file system event handler class, pass in the path to watch, and we're going to set recursive to false. Okay. So we need to pass in the following. So we've got our event handler, pass that in. We want to say the path is equal to path to watch. Now, bear in mind, if you think back in here, when I overrode this method, overrode this method, event.sourcePath is equal to self.file path. Look, I'm passing in the path to watch here, and that's where we're getting that source path from for the event. And we are saying, hey, is that equal to what we've set in our attributes? They should be the same. That's how we're ensuring we've got that continuity. Okay. And then we're going to set recursive equals false. Great. Okay then. So what do we need to start? And we are going to monitor. All right. So let's print out a little simple print message to our terminal. So we just say something like monitoring started. Great. And now let's use our observer object and simply call the start method. Great. And now what do we want to do? Well, I'm going to use a try and except block. And then within that, I'm going to put a while true, which is an infinite loop. And within that, I'm going to sleep. So it's going to be 1 second intervals. So it's essentially monitoring at 1 second intervals. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's have a look at that now. So I'm going to say try. And within that, I'm going to say while true time dot sleep for 1 second. And then I'm going to accept the keyboard interrupt. Essentially, if I want to stop by using Control-C at the terminal, I'm going to essentially get that, say, observer stop. Okay, and then finally, join. Great. So what we've done here, we've set the main function to start the observer, monitor the log file. It's as simple as that. And we've obviously used a try and accept block here. So we're saying, let's start it, run an infinite loop. So we're constantly monitoring. We're looking at 1 second intervals. So we're not, really racing our CPU. But if you want to interrupt at any point, we can do that. And that's everything. So at this stage, our file is ready to go. So we can save this And we should then be able to start monitoring our log file. So this is my log file, currently empty. I've actually set up a separate script which generates fake log entries. And with this script, we're going to generate a bunch of random log entries. And when they activate based upon these keywords, we should see some emails arrive at our email address. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out full screen. I'm going to set things up so that we can see the email address and monitor this email address. So let's have a look and let's see if we can get this set up. Great. So we have got our log file and we've got the email address that I'm monitoring. This is where I am sending my log error notification messages to. The only thing I need to do is run my files and see what happens. So I need to come over here and start my scheduler. So if we start the scheduler, so it is called log error notifier. So I'm going to start this and it's going to start monitoring for logs. And we've got an error, unexpected keyword argument path. So let's make sure that we can fix that because we've made an error somewhere. So let's go back into our code editor and let's fix what is broken. Let's have a little look here. What have we done? Okay, I think I have figured out what we've done wrong here. So I think what we need to do is we need to take this out. We're going to create a new observer object, then we can use the schedule method. I think that's what we've done wrong here. So we're going to say observer schedule, then we're going to pass in those parameters. Okay, let's save that. Let's now go back over here. Let's clear this all away and let's try that again. Monitoring started. All right. My bad there, small error, but we fixed it on the fly. So no big issues. The issue was I didn't use the schedule method, but I fixed that. So we're set. Okay, so the monitoring is started. We are now looking out for log error messages. Excellent. Now let's have a look at monitoring this log file. So let's have a look at this and we want to look, of course, at our inbox. And the point is we want to see whether or not there are any messages arriving in our inbox once they are being tracked in the log file. So we have our email inbox. We have the log file that we are monitoring. All I need to do now is run my second script, which is generating some fake logs, and we should see some logs show up within this file. And at the same time, if they generate any errors or any keyword matches, they should then show up inside our inbox. So let's click go and see what we get. So there we go. We're generating some logs, error, critical. With those, if I refresh my inbox, there you go, alert critical detected. So the emails are arriving. Our system is working. We are monitoring our log file. There are logs being generated. They are fake logs, but they give the impression of what would be going on. And once those are matching up with our keywords of critical or error, I refresh, we see all of these alerts are arriving. Fantastic. So everything is working as we would expect. So we've done it. Success. So great work. We've just built a log monitoring and notification system with Python. I think this is a really powerful tool for system admins and developers to stay informed about critical events. I think one of the great things about building projects like this is they have real world utility, real world use cases. It's great to build things that are fun, but I think if you're really trying to show your skills and show your worth, building things that can actually be used in a real live environment is so powerful, and I think better than anything else that you could be doing. So we've used Watchdog, we've monitored file changes using their file system event handler. We have set up Gmail with SMTP, which is covered in a separate video, but nonetheless we've done that in here too. And this program is now ready to go and it's fully extendable. You can use this to add monitoring multiple files, sending notification. Maybe you want to use SMS or Slack. You could build this out to not even use email. You can do whatever you like with this. The purpose is to get you set up with an automated error notification system, and now you've got it all done. So I hope you have fun with this project and that you followed along fine. Please let me know in the comments if there's anything you'd like me to cover or make more clear. But thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see you in the next one when we build more cool projects that actually have real world utility.